In this video, I'm going to introduce a few ideas of how we can use JavaScript mathematically. So a few ways that we can combine variables, add variables together, and I'm going to do this in the form of creating a little game where you guess how many fingers, metaphorically speaking, the computer is holding up. So essentially the computer is going to generate a random number between 1 and 5, and you're going to try and guess that number. So let's see how we might do this. We're going to start off by defining a few variables and just looking at how we can manipulate numerical values of variables. So let's define our variable again. We'll call it x again, and for a start we'll say x is equal to 5. So how would we do things like add some numbers to x or manipulate x in other ways? Let's just see a few simple things that we can do. So we can alert the value of x plus 1. So with any luck, this will alert 6. So x is 5, so x plus 1 is 6. Of course, we can add whatever value we like to x. So x plus 65, 5 plus 65 is 70. We can also multiply x by a certain value. So maybe we want to do 3 times x. We use the asterisk, so shift 8 to multiply values together. There we go, so 3 times x is 15. So those are the basic mathematical functions. We can do more complicated maths, so things like powers, for example. So if we wanted to do 5 to the power of 3, now we introduce the JavaScript math function here. So any complicated math function is contained within this math statement here. So if we wanted to do a power, we would do math.pow. Let's say for the moment that we want to do x to the power of 3. So 5 to the power of 3 is 125. With any luck, that's the answer that we'll get. Great. There we go. So math.pow x comma 3 does x to the power 3. We could also do 5 squared, so that would be 5 to the power of 2, 25. So how about creating a random number for our how many fingers game? Well, we use the math.random function. We don't want the 5, 2 anymore, but we do want the brackets after the function. And let's see what that does. It's given us a pretty random looking number there, 0.23 something. Let's do it again. 0.59, 0.97, etc. So we're getting a different number every time. It's pretty random looking, or at least it's random enough for our purposes. Notice that it's always 0. something. This random function always generates a random number between 0 and 1. So if you want to get a random number between, say, 0 and 5 that we want, you need to manipulate that original random number. It's not trivial, but it's certainly doable. So let's see how we're going to do that. So first of all, we'll change our code to let x be equal to our random number, and then we'll just alert x at the end, just to make sure that that still does the same thing. It just means that we're not having all of our code stored in that alert area, which will get a bit confusing. So we've got our random number between 0 and 1. In order to change it to a random number between 0 and 5, we're going to need to multiply that number by 5. So we're going to say x is equal to 5 times x. So a slightly confusing statement initially, but all we're saying is take x, multiply it by 5, and set that value to x. So we're basically multiplying x by 5. So let's see what effect that has. So now we're getting some bigger random numbers, 1.4, 1.5, 4.2, 3.8, 1.1, etc. So we're going to get random numbers that go all the way down to 0 and all the way up to 5. But we want a whole number of fingers, so we want to convert this to a whole number, and the way we're going to do that is to use the floor function. So x is equal to math.floor x. Now let's see what effect that has. So now we've got a nice whole number, 4 again, 1, 0, 0, 3, 3, 2, etc. So what floor does is it rounds x down to the nearest whole number below x. So if we've got a range of numbers that could go from 0 to all the way up to 5, then our math floor function is going to return a whole number which could be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now notice that 5 is not an option here because we can't get any numbers bigger than 5. So actually, if we want to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as our options, we're going to need to multiply x by 6 because we've got 6 different options there, not 5. We've got no fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So now what we've got is a random number that will go between 0 and 5. Great. So you can try that out a few times and make sure that it doesn't go above 5. But now we've got our random number. We're going to need to give the user an opportunity to guess what our random number is. So we'll change our paragraph text to how many fingers am I holding up? And we'll change the ID of the answer input to answer. So now that we've got our random number, all we need to do is to check whether our random number is equal to the number that the user has inputted. So we want to activate our function when the submit button is clicked. So you should know how to do that by now. Document.get element by ID, my button on click equals function, and then enclose everything else in curly brackets. Let's just move those in. We don't need the alert anymore. So what we want to do is test whether x is equal to the value that the user has put in their answer. So let's just see how that works. If x is equal to, and remember we need the double equals here because we don't want to set x equal to something, we want to test whether or not x is equal to something. And we want document get element by ID answer dot value. So this now checks whether or not the input is equal to the random number. So if it is, we want to alert that's correct. And if it's not, we want to alert that's wrong. Okay. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to start with a 1. Unsurprisingly, I've got it wrong. Let's change my guess to a 2. Still wrong. I'm only going to be right 1 in 6 times. Aha, I've got it right. Fantastic. Okay, just one thing to add to that, to make this game a bit more fun. It would be nice to know what the number was. Otherwise, you kind of feel that the computer's just lying to you. So if it's wrong, let's say that's wrong. The number was, in fact, let's say my number. And then we want to put the number on the end of that. So all we do is plus x. And that will then say my number was, and then it will give whatever the number was. So let's guess 4. That's wrong. My number was 2. And now it's at least fairly convincing. That was a 2 again. Two again. Oops. That's not a good guess. 4. Got to get it right at some point. No. 1. Okay. Could be here for a while. I won't show you all of the possibilities. So we've made quite a nice little game there. Maybe our first website that's actually worth sharing and worth playing with. Feel free to play around with that a little bit. You could change the number to make it more or less easy to get the correct number. or you can change the rules a little bit. You could put in an array that has certain different values of maybe types of food, and you have to guess what the computer's favorite food is. There's quite a lot of mileage there, which would allow you to practice your arrays and variables a little bit. So play around with it, post whatever you've done in the forums, and I'll be really pleased to take a look.